Topaz, Moze Hunt 7th. This powerful trio of units all have excellent qualities to them, yet which one is the best overall follow-up attack support? That's what I aim to answer today. My name is Juice and let's get into it. Let's start off with the money-savvy deck collector that's currently on banners, Topaz. This lady has a slew of excellent qualities. For starters, she's an amazing follow-up attack sub-DPS that fits into any comp of that niche which you desire. We'll focus on Fei Xiao and Dr. Ratio teams throughout this video, as those two are the main follow-up attack DPSs of Honkai Star Rail. Topaz is absolutely superb with Fei Xiao, as I've said in multiple videos in the past. To quickly summarize, she's the Yaoqing General's fastest stack generator, offers her a very high value debuff, which is especially nice for the General considering that her nuclear ult also counts as follow-up attack damage, and the two trigger each other's follow-up attacks very often. This allows for higher overall team DPS. With Dr. Ratio, aside from the fantastic sub-DPS that the deck collector provides, there's also that meaty debuff again, and as we all know, Mr. SAS Perkippy craves debuffs more than anything. Her high investment potential is also super high, which is very in character for Topaz, honestly. That E1 is a wild long-term increase to any follow-up attack team. No matter how many times the head main DPS of a team gets power crept, Topaz may always be a permanent fixture in these comps if you own said E1. You can also consider feasting your eyes on that light cone of hers. Not only is it quite a boon for her own personal sub-DPS, but you get another debuff out of it too, which increases the amount of crit damage you deal to an enemy. Perkippy Man is eyeing that up pretty heavily there. However, there is one major drawback to Topaz. That would be her cost as a limited 5-star. Before, she was definitively the best secondary follow-up attack teammate. But now that we have highly competent replacements, cheaper ones at that, choosing E0 S0 Topaz is a little more questionable. With that being said, she's definitely in the running for being the best supportive follow-up attack unit. Then we move on to Mr. Darkness Charge. This man has many qualities. For starters, his stack generation for Fei Xiao is absolutely incredible. You don't need any Eidolons for it to feel impressive. Personally speaking, he is my favorite follow-up attack partner to play next to the Yaoqing General, thanks to how niftily he triggers his follow-up attacks. His own sub-DPS is pretty neat if you stick him on a 4-piece diver set. Nothing overly incredible at E0 of course, but his contributions are still pretty solid. Reaching E6 definitely sweetens the deal when it comes to damage, however. A straight-up increase to his follow-up attack's damage multiplier is quite frankly nuts. However, what I really want to talk about is his E2, 40% crit damage for everyone, and it doesn't take very long to access either considering how quickly he goes through all of his follow-up attacks. This is amazing, especially considering that this niche is primarily a dual carry one. Plus, if you're using Best Boy Venturine in the team, then this is cool for his personal damage contributions as well. Moze himself also benefits from this. Another great thing that I want to mention when it comes to base Moze is the fact that he has a trace which increases the amount of follow-up attack damage that enemies take. Very useful. This all makes him a fantastic character if you care about Fei Xiao being an absolute nuclear bomb. This character has a greater focus on buffing the heck out of the wolf-blooded Foxian, which pours more weight onto the shoulders of Fei Xiao. She will be responsible for more of the team's damage share, as opposed to it being more split between both her and Topaz. Another big W for Moze is that he can use Topaz's light cone equally as well as the woman herself. He'll do a very nice amount of DPS on this light cone, but more importantly, he's able to offer the tame debuff just as well as the deck collector can. Plus, unlike Topaz, his big crit damage buff is significantly cheaper, assuming that getting a C2 Moze with average luck is possible for most people. So your allies will have more crit damage while dealing damage to enemies which are more vulnerable to taking crit damage. It also helps that Aventurine's ult can provide such a debuff as well, so that way you can have 2 enemies marked with said debuff at a time. Why pull for an E0 S1 Topaz when you could simply use an E2 S1 Moze? He's also way cooler. Saying this is somebody who loves both characters, by the way. Speaking of debuffs, this all makes him a wonderful choice for Dr. Ratio. His skills prey mark counts as one, so even a freshly out-of-the-box E0 Moze is going to be usable with him. I personally feel like Topaz is better here, because while Moze is capable of offering all of the same things, Ratio's damage isn't as front-loaded as Fei Xiao's. It feels more sustained and consistent over time, therefore lending itself more to dual carry teams. Even so, I do still believe him to be a formidable option. What he's able to provide is incredibly impressive, especially considering how 4-star releases in Honkai Star Rail tend to be quite disappointing. Definitely being put into the running for the best potential supportive follow-up attack teammate. Then we move on to Hunt 7th. I think the biggest deal when it comes to March is that she's free. Everybody can access this form of her, and because events are permanent in this game, all players are able to E6 her for absolutely zero cost whatsoever. Yet who cares if a character is free if they don't offer anything impressive? Oh ho ho, my friend, don't you worry. March definitely carries her weight in this team. I'd like to point out how she has a 60% crit damage buff in her base kit. That's 10% more than Topaz's E1 with max stacks, and 20% more than Moze's E2. I don't know about you, but considering that they put this on a character which costs you $0, pounds, euros, or whatever, I think that's pretty darn neat. Plus, that's not all of the buffs that she can offer. Hunt 7th can also offer your main DPS more delicious speed. On top of that, there's buffs for March 7th depending on which path your main DPS follows. Both Fei Xiao and Dr. Ratio are Hunt characters, so March is going to be enjoying the additional damage buff. Very creative way for a character to offer additional damage. Her ability to weakness break enemies that are weak to your main DPS's element is quite interesting. This is especially solid for Fei Xiao teams, where her basic attack in ult form deals more damage to weakness broken enemies. So faster breaks is more than welcome. Now, unfortunately, she is the slowest generator of the Yaoqing general stacks. With that being said, you still very much have an incentive to use her, because holy guacamole, her enhanced basic attack does numbers. Like, it is a genuinely decent damage contribution. What she lacks in stack generation, she makes up for it in said numbers. I find it kinda silly that she's this strong, considering that she was trained by one of the worst standard 5-stars in the entire game, or just one of the worst 5-stars period, along with one of the most forgettable limited 5-stars of all time. Wanting to cook Scott really got to her, huh? In any case, she is an utmost impressive Fei Xiao partner. Sadly, when it comes to Dr. Ratio, she doesn't have any debuffs within her kit. The other two do. This sadly means that she will be one of the least efficient units to use with him compared to the other two. Therefore, I don't recommend her there. Not very perkippy. Sadly, both this and the fact that her stack generation for Fei Xiao just isn't as fast as the other two kicks her out of the potential running. She's a wildly good unit considering her accessibility. No, but I'm not calling Hunt 7th bad by any means. She simply can't stack up to her competition in this regard. Then, for what everybody's been waiting for, the verdict. The thing is, it kind of depends on what sort of player you are and your level of investment. Let's cover those outcomes right now, why don't we? First off, if you're a super dedicated Fei Xiao main, then E2 plus Moze is the way to go. He will be nearly equally as good as an E0 S0 Topaz, and because he can use her light cone just as well as she can, there is no point in pulling her to utilize her cone fully when Bro can do so as well. Only at E1 S1 does Topaz start becoming better than Moze for the Foxy in general. This becomes even more evident if your Fei Xiao is at a higher level of investment. There becomes less and less purpose in having a sub DPS that is capable of doing their own really decent damage, as opposed to going all in on buffing your powerful, heavily invested 5-star DPS, therefore only making his case better over time. Plus, if you pull for multiple Fei Xiao copies, chances are that, unless you got extremely unlucky, you've got an E6 Moze, so you'll still be getting nice sub DPS out of him. If you get an E1 S1 Topaz, then things flip in her favor again, but without that E1, Moze is the winner. When we look at Dr. Ratio teams, no matter your investment, the deck collector is going to be better in my opinion. As I've already stated, Ratio isn't all that front-loaded. Fei Xiao isn't completely front-loaded either. Her follow-up attacks are still a significant part of her damage share, but her ult is still where things are really at. Ratio's damage profile is a lot more spread out in comparison, therefore wanting Topaz more. She does more damage than Moze, generally speaking, so it's less about buffing up your DPS for one huge front-loaded hit, and more about achieving a solid consistency. So, if Topaz is E0S1, Moze is better because you can just use that light cone on Moze instead and get the same level of effectiveness. If Topaz is E1S1, then the Deck Collector is the best supportive follow-up attack unit in the game. Either way, both of these characters are incredible. I did something I usually don't when it comes to evaluating how good characters are. I considered accessibility. I typically don't like doing that, because such a mindset is what leads to inconsistencies and biases for characters that aren't all that insane just because they're accessible. Yet, Honkai's Star Rail is a unique case in my opinion. It is a game that's rampant with extremely intense power creep, therefore causing a lot of FOMO in regards to pulling for the next best excellent 5-star. It feels like a new best character / support in the game gets released every next Tuesday. So when cheap characters are good, especially in a setting where they tend to not be very good on average, that really helps them stand out. You can definitely argue Topaz's case and come out on the other side feeling like she's actually the complete best on the whole. That's completely fair. Who knows, perhaps you may even think that I'm underestimating the almighty Hunt 7th. Yet when you have such incredibly competent options in front of you, wouldn't you agree that we should save our Stellar Jades for the next big release? Rappa's patch is undoubtedly going to be a filler patch. I smell some crazy units on the horizon. Remember that Sunday hasn't been made yet, and everybody who has finished the 2.5 story knows what's up regarding a certain character we thought to be gone. This is the calm before the storm, so I think it's wise to save your Jades for the insanity that's soon to come. In any case, all three are fantastic options with their own merits. I think you can make a super compelling argument for each unit that we talked about today. If you've come to a different conclusion than me, that's great, let's discuss that down below in the comments. Definitely let me know what you thought of this video. I found it to be an interesting topic to explore because it feels like Topaz's role got challenged by such incredible 4-stars out of nowhere. Hopefully this video was able to tell you the strongest follow-up attack support in Honkai Star Rail is. This has been Juice, signing out, and I think that Moze has the best design out of the three. Am I cooking or am I cooked?